The Brotherhood, an indie video game studio based in Cape Town, South Africa, is no stranger to crowdfunding. Their first game, STASIS, being funded on Kickstarter in December 2013 and released in late August 2015. It's a 2D isometric point-and-click sci-fi horror adventure game set in the distant future on a desolate spacecraft. Then they released a free-to-play spin-off game called CAYNE, taking place in the same dark universe. I have played both games on my channel, and I thought they were very atmospheric and well-made horror adventure games. And the Brotherhood also assisted in Exa Entertainment to make Wasteland 3, that came out a couple of months ago, look graphically as pretty as it does. Then they went to Kickstarter again in early 2017 to fund their next game project, Beautiful Desolation, that came out this year in February 2020. An isometric 2D adventure game set in the distant post-apocalyptic future in South Africa. And this is the game that I'll be talking about today. So, how fares the Brotherhood's second crowdfunded adventure game based in futuristic, desolate but still beautiful Africa? My name is Siperos and these are my thoughts on Beautiful Desolation. The game starts in Cape Town, South Africa in 1976. Our protagonist, a journalist named Mark Leslie and his fiancée Charlize, are driving in the rainy storm on their way to pick up Mark's drunken brother Don. The two have a discussion what to do with the wreck of a man until suddenly something appears in the sky and the storm causes the car to crash, killing Charlize. Time passes and 10 years later Mark goes to visit Don, asking him to take him to the Penrose. This large alien object that appeared in the sky out of nowhere the night the car accident happened. With it, the Penrose brought untold technological abundance that advanced civilization on all frontiers, eradicating hunger and disease, mastering energy, greatly advancing robotics, and a military organization called Penrose Allied was founded. But there were still people who feared the Penrose and the power and progression of Penrose Allied, and so wars continued. War never changes, I suppose. Mark, still not quite over Charlize's death and keeping the Penrose and partly Don responsible for the car accident, wants to learn and expose the Penrose for what it truly is. Don takes Mark to the floating object on a chopper in a powerful storm when the military's activity is at minimum. They manage to copy some data from a terminal on the Penrose and are about to leave, only to be intercepted by an acnate military robot dog. Then suddenly the Penrose activates and with a pulse sends Mark, Don and the robot dog to a distant post-apocalyptic future in South Africa where modern human civilizations are long gone after the wars, replaced by various diverse societies, both organic and mechanical matter, human and inhuman. Mark, along with his brother Don and the robot dog, Prototype 00 Combat Helper, or PUTS for short, must work together to find a way to get back to their own timeline. The story overall can be a little hard to follow, and I admit that even after playing through the game twice, I still don't quite get it. The protagonist, Mark Leslie, voiced by Julian Casey,
"If my brother is dead because of you, I'm going to hunt you down and turn what's left of your fucking head into a hood ornament."
Time has not been kind to you. I had almost forgotten how much fire lives within you.
I don't know about trying to find truth, but I am trying to find my brother.
Ah, brothers, what a blessing they are, to be sure. If you have nothing in life but a loving brother, you are most rich.
And yes, pretty much every voice actor is South African, using their own terrestrial accents, which I admit took me a little while to get used to since I don't get to listen to it often. Anyway, Mark is kinda hard for me to describe as a character because it really depends how the player makes him act around others. He can be either friendly, polite and sympathetic, caring for his brother despite his flaws, and seeing Pooch as more than just a machine, a loyal squadmate, not wanting to harm or pick a fight with anyone, no matter how hostile or inhuman someone might be. That's how I first played him. Or you can be like I was in my second playthrough, a complete grade A bitter douchebag, indifferent to others and their struggles and suffering, lying and threatening them to get your way. He can also treat his brother like garbage and Pooch as an occasionally useful but expendable toolbox if you want to be really cruel. As you can guess, the way how you treat people and certain factions you meet will affect the game's ending. You can't die in this game, unlike in the Brotherhood's past titles, so there is no risk in threatening a much taller and stronger acnate combat robot armed to the teeth. That's one criticism that I have about him as a character. Sometimes it feels like he doesn't give a fuck what's going on around him. He just accepts everything without so much as batting an eye, and does not seem to feel any awe or fear no matter who or what he's talking to. Mark's brother and companion, Don Leslie, voiced by Ian Cullen, is a sympathetic and supportive character throughout the game, no matter how you treat him, at least in my playthroughs.
Didn't save me from a real hiding in the end.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, Dad sent you off searching for dry wood. You were little. He just didn't want you around when he clubbed me. And that night he made me sleep without a sleeping bag. If I have to go cold tonight, then so do you. I remember you giving me your socks to put over my hands. I still think of gloves as Mark's socks to this day.
I don't want to spoil too much about the history, but let's just say they don't have the best relationship. Years ago, Don ran off to the military, where he got war traumas of his own during his service, eventually leaving and turning to alcohol a lot as we learned in the beginning of the game. And he feels responsible for Charlize's death and some other things, which would explain why he will do everything he can to help his little brother, to become a better man for both Mark's and Charlize's sake and to gain forgiveness for his mistakes. And Pooch, our acnate robot dog, voiced by Sarah Williams.
They formatted me too many times. Each time they left a little bit behind. Residual emotional programming would interfere with each new iteration. It became impossible to tell which data was intentional and which was incidental. I can still feel them working on me, human hands inside me. So no scanners. Nothing that could help us determine where we are. But I have my uses. I can perform medical checks. I can detect radio signals. I can detect static charge.
Another troubled soul with an unpleasant past, used as a test prototype in some sort of a military helper project most of her existence, her memories having been wiped over and over, becoming self-aware over time. She performs her duties diligently, but does not want to be treated as a pet or a tool, convinced that she has true feelings and that it's not just the programming. Despite being a robot, she, to me anyway, was the most emotional, even compassionate character of the trio, thanks to the voice actress's performance. I also like her sarcastic tone, and neither she nor Dawn shy away from sharing their views and opinions on things.
Well, then next time I need to tune a radio, I'll give you a fucking shot.
I also have a Class A asshole detector, and it is currently going off the charts.
You will meet many interesting and diverse cast of characters during your journey, all of them voice acted. Regular humans, be it monster hunting mongrels or more primitive black African-like tribesmen, and more unusual and inhuman creatures like acnate military robots, these half-organic and half-mechanic people, talking plants, sentient parasites, self-aware Rubik's Cube AIs, and even a talking train. No, you can't ride it. The biggest disappointment I had about the game. I really must praise the Brotherhood for the creativity of the character design, their life philosophies, traditions, and religions they follow. All of them have something interesting to say about their views on the world around them, their struggles and sacrifices. Who is the best character in my opinion, you ask? Why, it's Jerry.
We could even choose and remember our names.
You went with Jerry?
I like the name Jerry. Makes me feel like a real person. Names can mean a lot when you've never had one.
Shame that you only meet him briefly. I also like how the characters are presented in close-up looks like this. Reminds me of the first Fallout games. Speaking about Fallout, I have heard some people comparing Beautiful Desolation to original 2D Fallout games. A few even expected the former to be a role-playing game similar to Fallout, only to be surprised, even disappointed, that it is a point-and-click adventure game. After all, the game takes place in a post-apocalyptic world, presumably hundreds of years in the future. It's isometric, and the UI may remind you of classic Fallout as well. But that's where their similarities end. Let's talk about the world itself a moment. Beautiful Desolation has a very unique setting that I haven't seen in other games. It takes place in South Africa, for one. Secondly, even though the world is post-apocalyptic, it's not just arid radioactive wasteland. The game has gorgeous and colorful environments that vary from lush jungles full of life to boiling hot volcanic areas and even snowy mountain peaks. Even the cutscenes look cinematic and really good, especially considering this is a $20 game. It's a very, beautiful world overall to look at, filled with lots of detail, interesting characters and factions on top of that. It's also a very big world to explore. You don't just move from one location to another by walking, but also travel around using your Buffalo, a flying vehicle. And not only you fly around in one zone or region, you use these Stargate looking things that basically work like the mass relays from Mass Effect, that use the Penrose technology to travel to other zones with more locations to explore. Beautiful Desolation is the first adventure game that made me think, this setting could easily work as a role-playing game. The potential is certainly there. After seeing the Brotherhood and In Exile Entertainment working together on Wasteland 3, I have this tiny weeny hope that the two would work together again in the future to make a CRPG taking place in the world of Beautiful Desolation. I know it's a very far-fetched dream that most likely won't happen, especially now that In Exile is under Microsoft's umbrella, but I can always dream. Moving on to gameplay, Beautiful Desolation is your typical item-based point-and-click adventure game where you pick up various items to use them in some specific way or give to certain people in order to gain something in return and move on. Sometimes you can decide who to give an item to, like for example the remote controller for a powerful weapon, giving power to one faction and dooming their rivals in destructive results. So the player does have some real choices with consequences in the game, which is not something we see in point-and-click adventure games very often. But it's a harsh world and no matter what you do, someone will get the shorter end of the stick and gets destroyed. The inventory is also quite big, as you can see, with usually a dozen items or more in it. Some of them can be combined and the game even tells you that. There are also some items that can't be used at all, mostly the upgrade parts installed in your Buffalo. At first I wondered why they bothered to show them in your inventory at all, and I think that it's simply to remind the player that hey, remember you got this heat resistance upgrade installed? Maybe you can go somewhere where you couldn't before. There's also this item you get somehow out of nowhere very early on in the game, but the game doesn't tell you what it is. Judging from my two very different playthroughs, it's a karma meter that shows what kind of ending you're about to get unless you change your attitude and behavior. And there are at least 4 endings in total by the looks of it. You will also find golden items that you trade for credits that you in turn use to buy stuff from the merchants, from essential Buffalo upgrades to useless but decorative digitices. You find gold items from many locations, but you have to get quite close to them in order to spot them. So remember to explore thoroughly every new location you enter. The key items that you need are spotted more easily, but if you ever get stuck in the game, like I did often, go back to some locations and check every nook and cranny in case you missed anything. Also a good bet is to go and talk to some people again you have already met just to check if you got new dialogue options. So there is quite a bit of backtracking in Beautiful Desolation. I personally don't mind scouring the locations from top to bottom because they are beautiful to look at, but I can understand if others find it tedious. Besides simple item-based puzzles, there are some minigames as well. Like this sticky bug fight where you throw dice and the one with higher number gets to attack. You even have 3 items, each with their own effect that you can use only once. And then there's a deeper game where you fight using combatants with their own abilities in an arena. It's 3 versus 3 and you use action points to perform actions, usually to attack. You get more different fighters after helping certain factions who reward you with tokens that unlock them for you. This is the only form of combat Beautiful Desolation has. It's fun and a nice change to gameplay, but the game once again doesn't really tell you how it works. It's not too complicated or anything, but it would have been nice to know that the action points you don't use this turn can be used later next turn, allowing you to use very deadly combos, giving more strategy to the game. You must battle and beat 5 opponents, each requiring around 2 to 4 battles to get the item you need, which I bet many find tedious. And I admit, I thought I had to beat 1, 2 too many opponents, each harder than the last in my experience. However, the Brotherhood offers players another way to get the same item, so don't worry, you don't need to go through these arena battles to beat the game. I actually got the same item twice in my first playthrough, by beating all the opponents at the arena and through the more traditional adventuring. It was in my second run where I realized that I had a choice how to get it and so I skipped the arena. Really appreciate that choice I was given. What I personally like about Beautiful Desolation is how it doesn't hold your hand. It gives you a long-term goal how to get back home, which is finding these 3 specific items, then a clue where to start from, but after that you're on your own, giving this open world feel. And that's what makes Beautiful Desolation a hard game despite very basic item puzzles, lack of information. Which I'm sure many think is just bad design, but I honestly found it refreshing. It really made me feel like I was playing a game from the 90s when adventure games and games in general were harder. However, it's a double-edged sword. While it is a great feeling to have this sense of freedom and not being handheld by the game, the chances of getting stuck and frustrated is higher. At first the game didn't even have a quest log, and I admittedly did forget what I was supposed to do a few times. You could use your PDA to reread your past conversations with people, but that's it. But in my second playthrough months later, I noticed that the Brotherhood had made some new additions to the game due to player feedback, I suppose. Most notably the to-do list reminds you what your long and current short-term goals are to keep you on track much better. And then I noticed this one little hint on the bottom left corner of this screen here during this one puzzle, which I think is the most frustrating one in the entire game, to give at least one clue how you're supposed to solve this. I still didn't understand how this puzzle where you move between two terminals actually works. First time I think I solved it by half accident, and the second time, even with the hint, I still didn't get it and just checked out the guide briefly to get it over with. I would be very impressed if you managed to get through Beautiful Desolation without relying on a walkthrough even once. Lastly, regarding the music, the composer is Mick Gordon, who is perhaps best known for his soundtracks in Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal. The soundtrack of Beautiful Desolation is okay and sets the tone of mysticism, futurism and wonder with African vibe to it occasionally, but at the end of the day isn't mind-blowing. It's mostly the type of music that is in the background to set the ambience, but you most likely won't remember much of it after beating the game. This track you hear in the background now is my favorite. In my 2 playthroughs, I sank about 40 hours into the game in total. And what a unique and memorable trip it has been. Beautiful Desolation is a gorgeous looking isometric adventure game with a compelling, albeit a little hard to follow story, and is definitely on the harder side as far as difficulty goes. Even frustrating at times, mostly due to the lack of information on some game mechanics or what certain items are for, and how easy it is to miss those set items first time around. The to-do list that was later added, however, helps out a lot to keep you better on track of things. The Brotherhood has created a very unique and fascinating tribal punk-like world, with interesting characters and where old traditions meet new sci-fi technology. It is a story about loss and forgiveness, the relationship between human and machine, and the bond between brothers, or at least that's what I got from it. Your choices have real consequences, and the game has multiple endings, so it even has replay value. I can definitely recommend Beautiful Desolation to anyone who doesn't shy away from a challenging adventure and wants to experience something new and original, or just something that has its own twist to post-apocalyptic genre. Beautiful Desolation for me is definitely the most memorable adventure game of 2020. Just recently, the Brotherhood announced their sequel to STASIS called STASIS Bone Totem, and this story seems to take place in the deep depths of the Pacific Ocean, so an underwater horror story. They are providing a free demo of the game, so check it out. The link can be found down below in the description. And there you go folks, those were my thoughts on Beautiful Desolation. What are your thoughts on the game? Let me know in the comments and thanks for watching.